Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players podcast. Back with you, PTF, at the Little House on the East Side. We're going to be talking about a loaded weekend of racing, Grade 1 action at Saratoga and Del Mar. Ellis Park had some good stuff too in their preview day. We'll be getting to those races on another show in good time, as we're going to be previewing every day of the upcoming Kentucky Downs meet. Very excited about that. The Mint Millions Betting Challenge. That's one coming up. You can qualify for that from our friends over at twinspires.com. Speaking of contests, as we get the business out of the way in a hurry here, we do have another ITM Horse Players Tour coming up on Friday. The numbers have been building. People are pumped. 2 ways to win your BCBC seat, $20 to play, and the house cut goes to aftercare. Go to horseplayers.com to learn more about that. But back to the business at hand. We're going to look at these races at Saratoga. None more compelling than the Whitney. And to do that with us, we bring in Nick Tammaro. Nick, how good is this Sierra Leone?
You know, he's good, Pete. He's really, really good. And in fact, he was always there. But he is obviously a victim of some circumstance at times because of his style. And, you know, it kind of, I hate invoking this horse, but it sort of reminds you why so many of us wanted to see them get more aggressive with Zenyatta and see how she performed in dirt races consistently. And if she had been at the same level she was on synthetics, then she would have truly been, and she's an all-time great anyway, but it would have really added that much more to her appeal, because it's hard to be an off-the-pace dirt horse and win consistently. You're at the mercy of the pace more often than not. So I think the Connections consciously decided that, hey, we're going to change things up a little bit. We're going to put somebody in there that might ensure there's a little bit of pace. Ironically, this ended up coming up a race where there was a pretty dedicated speed horse signed up anyway. And, you know, would Sierra Leone have won if Mama's Gold was by himself and not necessarily with contrary thinking riding shotgun? Probably. The way that everybody ended up running, maybe Highland Falls would have been able to stave him off. But I think Sierra Leone's, because he lost so many races where he was well backed, he seems to have become this sort of villain for a lot of horse players. And he's not. He's a very good horse that, you know, he won the most important dirt race outside of for older horses last year in pretty compelling fashion. So he's always been very good. I think the fact that he had lost twice in an overly results-oriented world made it so that he didn't have really the star, I guess, that he deserves, because he's a star. And he proved it on Saturday unequivocally. He's the first part, of course, of the conversation in the Whitney. And to me right now, the favorite for the Breeders' Cup Classic.
I agree. The markets internationally do not agree, because there's so much buzz around sovereignty. There was one book, and I actually said something I probably shouldn't have said on TV yesterday. Darrell Williams, my colleague, was reading out the prices, and there was some 9-1 around on Sierra Leone, and I just blurted out, somebody at that bookmaker's asleep at the switch.
Yeah.
But he's widely available sixes, which still isn't bad. Isn't it true? You make a good point. There's still doubters out there, I guess, for Sierra Leone. Not exactly sure why, but isn't it as simple as great training job, horse that has improved, and he had that obvious lugging flaw that's gone. And I mean, if you're going to mature and you're going to fix what was wrong with you, isn't it just like any sort of athlete making, you know, you look at a minor leaguer who has a flaw. These guys get better all the time. They come up, maybe they struggle, and then they continue to develop. And the next thing you have, you know, James Wood. Like, isn't that what's going on with Sierra Leone?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's that argument can definitely be made. You know, he's a horse that obviously matured. He grew up. He did advance from 3 to 4, which doesn't always happen. And I think it's important to acknowledge that the job was done to ensure that he would get there, and he did. So this is a great training job by Chad Brown, because this is a hard luck horse that had obviously had some things happen along the way that didn't really work in his favor, and now they are. So it's this is obviously one of the goals. It's probably the biggest goal outside of the Breeders' Cup that the Connections had for him this year, and he was able to get it done. So no, he doesn't look anything like the horse that we saw last year. And you know, we were very exposed to him with the Triple Crown and the amount of times that he ran. And I think that some of the frustration that accompanied his running style and his fooling around a lot on the racetrack is what led to him being a little less popular. But he seems to have gotten it all straightened out.
I don't think it means much to him and his connections at this point. I think they're laughing all the way to the bank about any haters that might still be out there. I do want to you've already alluded to the second part of the conversation we need to have, and we'll get there, but I do have more on Sierra Leone, at least a little bit more. Just to clarify, you would, heads up, same price, Breeders' Cup Classic winner today, Sovereignty Sierra. You'd go Sierra?
I would. Yeah.
And what goes into that? Just the maturity factor, or is there more to it than that? And
I mean, I hate to sound like the sort of get off my lawn guy with Sovereignty, but the water's a lot deeper in the older horse ranks. And so last year's Breeders' Cup going to the 3-year-olds in the 1-2 spots said a lot about the older horses. And we already knew that the older horses stunk. That's why the 3-year-olds dominated. Look how this whole season went, right? It was a bad group of horses. It was a low level handicap division. This isn't at all. This is a much better handicap division. And when Sovereignty ends up making his way to the Breeders' Cup Classic, he's going to be making his 7th start of the year. I hate saying that, seems like a lot, but he's going to have to elevate his game a little bit. And right now, Sovereignty's only run one race that was fast enough to compete with Sierra Leone's 2 best races. And if you want to ask me who's going to be a better closer, a more proficient closer, I'm going with Sierra Leone because he also has that. He can sustain that ability for so long. Now, Sovereignty's outstanding. And believe me, to me, they would be, they'd be 1-2 right now in the Breeders' Cup Classic rankings with Nisos and Mindframe right behind them. But that's the way I would go as of right now. No recency bias.
109 was the speed figure for Sierra Leone. I think Sovereignty's top is a 107. So Sovereignty fans and the bookies who have that price so short are probably just projecting summer to fall improvement and saying, well, to us, Sovereignty's still faster. But, your way of looking at the world sounds about right to me. Journalism may be conspicuous in his absence from that little top 4 ranking you just did there for us.
I mean, he'd be 5th, right? It's just that journalism has not run a complete race with a fast final number yet. But I trust the barn implicitly. And I think he'll probably have a bit of a home court advantage, him and Nisos. So I'm intrigued to see what their respective next races look like and whether they might come against each other or we see journalism ship east again, which it seems like he really doesn't have to. But yeah, I think I'd put him a close 5th at this point.
So now we'll get to that long-awaited second half of the conversation. As impressed as I was by Sierra Leone, that's how disappointed I was with Fierceness. And I've heard some apologists for this talking about the pace, talking about this or that, but I have no other way to say it. This was a terrible race. This was a no-finish trip. This was a horse on whom I'd have doubled my bet turning in, and the kind of effort that's so poor, I wonder when or if we'll see him again on the racetrack. And I hate to be so negative, but I don't see any other way to frame it, Nick. Am I being too negative?
No, it's those are all legitimate concerns, right? I mean, you would have made him 3-5 at the quarter pole, the way Johnny was sitting in the saddle and the fact that he had just glided up and grabbed the lead. And you know what it reminded me of, Peter? It reminded me of the 2014 Whitney. And in the 2014 Whitney, Palace Malice was an enormous favorite. He had been virtually flawless that year. He actually was going in 4 for 4. He had won the New Orleans Handicap, blew Normandy Invasion's doors off, ran a really good race in the Met Mile, beat Golden Sense, came back a couple of months later. He was supposed to really make that his standout performance. He was 3-5, and he was god-awful. And we never saw Palace Malice at that level again. And I think Fierceness is now a race-to-race horse, and he has one more opportunity. If he runs off the board in his next start, we're never going to see him again. And I think that matters, right? That he just probably. I keep going back to it, and I'm not necessarily a stickler when I think I'm right and everybody else is looking at it differently. The Ali Sheba was not as good as everybody wanted to make it out to be because it was a super slow-paced race. And when you're dealing with these super slow-paced dirt races, you're going to get margins and results that don't really match up when those scenarios don't play themselves out. The other thing is that this is a division that culminates in a race that never has a slow pace, right? It's like saying that the Derby's going to have a slow pace. It's almost impossible for the Classic to not have at least a even on the good side of moderate to fast, tight pace. So, I just think Fierceness hasn't really gone on. And I said to you guys on the Inner Circle show on Saturday, it really bothered me how tamely he went down in the Met Mile. And I loved Raging Torrent, don't get me wrong, but he didn't put up much of a fight. Now, Could he find his way into a scenario where he gets his coveted fierceness first over stalking trip and he can go on with it and look like a good thing? Sure. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him resurface in a race like the Lucas Classic, where they might be able to set that up just at least to get him back to the Breeders' Cup. But this isn't one kind of subpar race in a row. This is a very poor effort following a subpar effort, and that's got to concern everybody.
I was too dismissive of the Met Mile. I do think it was much more of a case, as you intimated, of a horse maybe going in the wrong direction. I just wanted to sort of put a line through it and focus on that Ali Sheba, and that was the wrong handicapping decision. Let's talk about the pace.
That I want to just throw in there, and look, it's not beating up on him. The guy is probably one of the 3 best trainers of the modern generation. There's a reason why Todd Pletcher has never trained a horse of the year and never trained a 3-year-old champion. Todd is one of the absolute best of all time on a race-to-race basis. But getting horses to extend themselves to a 9+ month campaign has never really been Todd's bag. Right. It's never really been. That's why he's won a couple derbies, won quite a few Belmonts, but it's just not really his thing. And this is a horse that he was training well. I watched all of his workouts. He looked great. He was working with Dreamlike, burying him every day, and he was just dull. And we've seen this happen before, specifically from this barn.
Let's talk about the pace a little bit, because I heard a lot of people talking about how fast it was. I thought it looked like Fierceness ran very efficiently, because the fast middle, and I really want to drill down into the middle part of the race when we have pace figures, because maybe he ran a lot faster in the middle part of the race than I was giving credit for, and maybe you can give a little bit of an excuse for that. But to me, whatever he was, 6 lengths off those posted fractions, looked to me like he was running efficiently, and the best of Fierceness puts on a show from there, and Sierra's a hard charging second, and the best of Fierceness just isn't knocking on that door anymore. That's how I saw the pace. It looked fast-ish, but that his run was efficient enough that he shouldn't have gone away so tamely. A horse that ran a darn 160 early figure on time for him in the Classic and still hung on for second. I mean, I don't even think, even if the middle part of the race was blazing fast, it doesn't excuse it to me. But just give me your overview of the pace from what you saw and any diving you've done into what the clock had to say.
I mean, if you think the pace was exceptionally fast, then you're probably dying on betting Highland Falls next time, right? He was never that far behind Fierceness.
He's right there.
He still nearly won the race. So, I don't, the track was slow. The times were slow. In terms of buyer speed figures, it was about a -12 variant, which is probably 10 to 12 points slower than a normal Saratoga racetrack. So I do think you have to factor that in a little bit. I mean, I want to say it was probably on the faster side of moderate, but it doesn't look like it was exceptionally fast. The other thing is that there were 2 races going on, right? So the horses that were hitting the clock and setting those fractions, they weren't like real participants in the race.
Right.
Mama's Gold had no chance. He's a very good New York bred, and Contrary Thinking was in there to be a pacemaker. Somebody that you and I both know went on a rant on Twitter about Contrary Thinking being a pacemaker. It really wasn't his finest effort. But anyway, that's a totally separate issue. They were doing Contrary Thinking was doing his job. He did exactly what I told Steve Bick, I told you guys on Saturday morning, when you have a rabbit, it's not the first quarter, it's the second quarter. The second quarter is where you need to juice the race up, and that's what they did. And so I don't think it was. I think if you're looking for an excuse for Fierceness pace related, you're probably grasping at straws.
Yeah, I thought Johnny did a brilliant job. The question was, is he going to get lit up and to have other horses making moves? And he looked to me that first half of the race, he's just running his race. You're counting your money to me if you'd backed him up to that point. I suppose you mentioned him, but I don't want to give short shrift to Highland Falls. This was an effort, ends up with a 107 buyer speed figure. Definitely a horse that could have a valuable prize next to his name, and a career best from Disarm with his 104 as well. Any comments quickly on any of the others in the field before we get to some of these other races we got to talk about on the show?
Feels like Highland Falls might be a Saratoga horse for course. We'll see. I think Brad might agree with that if we see him back in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, which would be the best place for him to prep anyway. It's the only Grade 1 opportunity left between now and the Breeders' Cup Classic. I suppose he's a horse that could end up in the Lucas Classic or the Woodward potentially. But yeah, I think they'll want to go the 10 furlongs and let him get the full effect of that. But he ran very well. Disarm ran fine. I think the clock has struck midnight on White Abario, who is just not really at this level and will forever go down as a horse that had these 3 incredible performances in a career that was otherwise modest. But yeah, they I don't want to shortchange any of those. And Highland Falls is definitely worth some conversation based on the race that he ran. I'm a Breeders' Cup Classic top 10 voter, and I put him, I believe, 8th on my list. So
okay,
9 horses, that makes sense.
Getting on the radar. It wasn't awful from a Barrio figure wise, the 103, but the line from King of Comedy comes to mind as you were just giving your take on him. Better to be king for a day than schmuck for a lifetime.
You got that right, right? And he's the epitome of that. And one of the days that they crowned him, I made some money, so he owes me nothing forever. But yeah, he's just, I don't know if it was 2 of those races were for Dutrow, 1 was for Safi, so I don't know what exactly it is. He trains like a brilliant horse, then he gets out there with this kind of competition and just isn't at that level. So, I mean, you can't say he doesn't love Saratoga. What about the 23 Whitney? So, it just doesn't all jive.
A couple of quick shout outs to other of our sponsors. We do have the New York bread sale coming up next week. I'm going to be very interested to see what happens there, potentially getting involved with our friends from Adelphi. If you want to check out much more information about the New York bread sale, check out that nytbreeders.org website. And our friends at Monmouth Park, off the heels of a successful contest last weekend, now getting ready to ramp up to their Travers Day contest, which will have racing from Monmouth and from Saratoga. Go to monmouthpark.com to check that one out. Let's talk about some of the other impressive performances that we saw on Saturday. We'll start with Kilwin in the test. This is another race I'm kind of dying to see the pace figures on, Nick, because watching it live, it didn't look like the kind of burn up that I was expecting and that you typically expect in the test. But this race unfolded like a darn accordion in the stretch and absolutely looked like it must have been a fast pace the way it melted down. Which take is correct?
Yeah, it's one of those where this is the epitome of Richie Migliori's. It's not how fast you're going, it's how you're going fast, right? And so the thing that, and I think I really learned more about this calling races, watching more races through binoculars, because I'm like you, I watched 99% of the races I see at that point on a television, and your number's a little lower because you do get to Saratoga more often. But when you see them packed in like that, that often makes up for the difference between whether the pace is fast or not. So you take a horse like Look Forward coming off a route, you take a horse like Ragtime probably isn't the best example because she was a little separated from the field. Beauty Reigns was moving around the outside. When you cluster those horses together and you put 6 of them together going 46 flat at 7 furlongs, that's going to take more of a toll because they're all battling, right? And I've heard a lot of people, Andy Serling always said there's nothing better than sitting behind 3 horses dueling.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what Ragtime and Kilwin were able to do. Did Kilwin actually benefit from breaking slowly? Yes, she did. Now, she didn't benefit from stumbling because obviously something can happen at that point, and she probably lost a little more ground than she needed to. I don't think Jose by Design was going to be that far back. He ended up that far back because she broke slowly. It was a race that ended up working out well for her in terms of how it played out because the pace came back. They came back so much. I mean, it was a complete collapse. That's as gold a pace collapse as you're ever going to find. I used to make money in races like this, but what it leads to, Pete, is I'm very skeptical of the quality of this race. Right. I would be very, very careful with those horses. The other problem they're all going to run into is the filly and mare sprint division, and we'll talk a little bit about Copian later. It still has a ways and means problem for all the 3-year-old fillies. Yep. So it's going to be a really big ask for anybody. Hell, there was a 3-year-old filly earlier on in this card that ran a hole in the wind for Phil Bauer that ran almost as fast. She got a 95. So this is a projected figure. This is not a play it straight figure. This is a projected number. It could easily be an 89, but I think the conventional thought was that they probably ran a little bit better than that. So it came back to 96 that it did. I'd be very careful with it.
I like that analysis. Very, very interesting. And you're making what I saw when I saw it didn't make sense to me. You're making it make sense. That's why you're so good on these shows, my friend. Let's talk about the Saratoga Derby, won by World Beater. Not one I was clever enough to come up with. Earns a 93 Beyer speed figure. Boy, did I feel hard done. The boys on the Inner Circle show, including you, made such a good case for Dweiler, or I think that's how you say it. This horse, to me, really was the best. I mean, boy, to walk out of the gate, make that rush up, and stick on so gamely. This felt like this one should have been a nice win at 28-1, and instead for me, who wasn't smart enough to back it up properly, it was just painful. But am I probably short selling World Beater a little bit? This was a nice step up and a good win.
Yeah, but I mean, believing that World Beater ran well and got a great ride and trip, and that Juvelier was best aren't mutually exclusive.
Right.
I mean, I think that's exactly how I feel. I know that's exactly how I feel. Juvelier should have won this race. I mean, there's no question about it. I don't love using the should have won type of statement, but I mean, he should have won this race. If he gets out of the gate cleanly and establishes a more comfortable early lead, they never run him down. And I think I tweeted yesterday that I wish somebody domestically would buy him, because that horse would just be a terrorist next year in Grade 1 turf routes. I mean, you could see him in the Manhattan, you could see him in the race at Churchill Downs, and there hasn't been a real quality speed horse among the older horses going in the more classic type turf routes since fill in name Little Mike. I mean, it's been a long time, right? Because the division's been dominated by a guy like Chad Brown, and Chad doesn't have a barn full of speed horses. No. So then we saw the Appleby invasions over the years, and his horses aren't going to have a ton of speed coming from over there. So this horse would be a ton of fun, and he ran great. It was a very unfortunate result if you backed him. I couldn't get to the winner. I think I texted you on Saturday, like, these races are probably just too hard for me. Yes. But I couldn't really work out in my head, how can World Beater beat Test Score? I've also overrated Test Score to a degree. He's good. He's very good. Don't get me wrong. I still think he's probably pound for pound the best 3-year-old turf horse in America. The problem with him is he's such a bicycle horse that, Manny was using him down the backstretch. Like, you watch the Fox show, he's getting worked on down the backstretch. He's in a full out drive from the 3/8 pole home, but he's this odd turf horse that runs like a dirt horse. Like, he gets going once you get him going. Usually a turf horse is like much more squeeze them and they run, they pick up the bridle, they start the bit, they start going. He's atypical. I wonder if he's hurt in a slower paced race. I wonder if he needs a little bit more separation so that when he hits his stride, they're coming back to him a little bit. Now, it could also be that this was the best speed horse he's run against and he couldn't get by it. So this Juvelier is a very, very talented horse. We're probably butchering this name, but the hell with it. So, yeah, it was very good. Big credit to Riley Mott for getting his first Grade 1 win, and Josephine Abercrombie's Pin Oak stud, which we don't see those silks as often anymore, but it's a great set of silks. And Junior, it's unfortunate. Jamie Torres missed his flight. His connecting flight, I think, got canceled to come to New York, and Junior Alvarado picked up the mount. And boy, I mean, Jamie must have been disappointed, but there is no chance he could have ridden this horse as well as Junior did. I mean, Junior did everything right and needed every inch of that perfect ride and trip to get the job done.
Yeah, it was an exciting race for sure. Let's pivot to the 4-star Dave. Another race where I was wrong. Deterministic, who I thought was last time was the time horse, said not so fast. Great ride by Kendrick Carmouche, perfectly positioned, able to get the jump on the flying late. Intellect, who was my selection, and once again screwed up the betting. Did not have any saver exactas going here. Deterministic wins the second Grade 1 of Saratoga 2025. And we talked about Riley Mott, amazing story. Obviously, Miguel Clement, one of the stories of the summer, the terrific job he's done since having to take over from his father. What'd you think of Deterministic's run, where he earned a 101 career best Beyer speed figure?
Yeah, you and I were in the same boat. We felt similarly about Deterministic. We thought last time was the time. He rode a gold inside, wouldn't be as effective without the lead, yada, 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 and he stuffed us in a locker, right? I mean, he didn't have any of that, but an excellent training job by Miguel Clement. And, a little bit of a nod to his late father, who could have easily, and obviously Miguel was probably involved in these conversations, they could have run this horse in the Derby last year. He had enough points, but they consciously avoided it. They knew that he would have potential as a 4-year-old. Credit to the ownership, which is made up largely of people that have either had Derby horses or probably will at some point. It's a big group of people that includes former NYRA board chairman Steve Dunker and Vinny Viola. So, we hear the phrase like doing right by the horse, so on and so forth. They did right by this horse, and he's delivering for them now with a couple of Grade 1 wins. So, yeah, really easy group to cheer for. And I'll tell you what, the videos of Kendrick going back and stopping and high-fiving everyone and taking pictures with everyone and signing autographs, like there is no other jockey currently going that the fans will be able to experience as a real person like Kendrick. And it's such a, I mean, Rayla Gutierrez would probably be at the same level if he was winning grade ones, but Kendrick is such a great ambassador for the sport. And it's so nice to see that happen. So yeah, really easy human connections to cheer for. Didn't help me financially whatsoever.
Same boat, like you said, same boat. We'll get to the grade one out at Del Mar, more Breeders' Cup win, and you're in action there. But anything else at Saratoga to rapid fire touch on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the 2-year-old stakes from the weekend, we had Ewing win on Saturday in the Saratoga Special. A little bit of a step backwards for Ewing. I mean, if you look at speed figures, a little bit more than a little bit of a step backwards. He was backwards 17 points. Was going 6.5 for the first time. You know, Andy Beyer told me a long time ago when I started making Beyer speed figures, be careful about how much you sort of hold it against lightly raced or young horses when they start going distances longer than they ever have before. But 6.5 is not that much farther than he went his debut. Right. If it was a mile and he got a 70 Beyer speed figure, I'd probably feel a little bit better about it. The track was slow in the early portion of the day, but this was Ewing more on like an 11.5 rebound, 0 blocks type night than it was the Hoya Destroyer. Right. This was not really what we saw. And it was a big step back for Obliteration, who, I watched a lot of workouts for last week. I decided, let me change it up and try something different. And so I watched a lot of workouts Monday and Tuesday after that card was drawn. And I thought Tagermeen handily outworked him on July 21st. And Tagermeen came back and underperformed in the first race. And so I had a feeling that Obliteration was going to take a little bit of a step back. I will imagine now Steve will regroup, and we'll get a better version of him because he's good. He ran 2 good races. It's hard to think that the version we saw of him Saturday is the version of him moving forward. Now that I've gone on way too long, Mythical won the Adirondack yesterday and is now 3 for 3, beat Males in her second career start in the Tremont, and came back as a pretty nice even money price yesterday.
I can't believe they didn't bet that horse more. What was going on?
Well, for all the crap on social media about, they're crooks, they steal from the exacta pool, blah, 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 CAW, this and that, which some of it's deserved. This horse should have never been anywhere near even money.
One to two shot on paper.
Even Pat Cummings, Mike Rapoli's caddy, and I were talking this morning, and he said, how the hell was Angel Gift 2-1? So, I mean, that must have been the prevailing sentiment in the Rapoli camp. So, yeah, I have no idea. This horse paying even money was nuts.
Yeah, that was crazy. I'm glad we got that shout out in there, and more things to come. 3 minutes left, and we got to talk about the Clement El Hirsch out at Del Mar, because this race came back fast. 110 for Seismic Beauty. Copion 107. I mean, this is some racehorse time here. If this figure's to be believed, did you interrogate the figure? Is it right? How good are these? How good are these horses?
So the only problem with this fig, Pete, is this is the lone dirt route of the day. Okay. So if Andy played it straight, gave it the same figure he would have if it had been run at 7/8 in terms of the variant. This was on the slower side of a Del Mar surface, so we usually will see it a little bit quicker. But that's the concern, is that it was the only dirt route. It was bracketed by turf races. They pretty much do turf dirt all day in the back ends of the carts in Southern California now. So that would be the only real worry. And of course, you also had going into it the question of which of these Baffords was going to go to the lead. You kind of felt like it would be Seismic Beauty, and it was. And Ricci was taken back to stock. I was surprised with how far behind Copian was, and I don't really know if that was the optimal scenario. It looked to me a little bit like the old, we're worried about her getting the trip, so let's drag her the hell out of it. She ran very well, Pete. I think they're probably thinking that, which, hey, I wanted to see a Copian Ways and Means showdown in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint, but she ran too well in here to be cut back.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do. I agree tactically the way it played out. Would have been nice if she could have been closer, but it's hard to question the trip at this point with her running near to her best, right? That if that's 107 is right, and she's got the 109 and 110 sprinting, be very interesting to see how it plays out in that division. We're just about out of time. Nick, thank you so much for your time and insight. You can read Nick's picks for Saratoga every day in themoneypodcast.com. And if you want even more, you got Nick's notebook, as well as Frankly Speaking, our Del Mar diary from Frank Scatoni over on the In the Money Plus side, inthemoneypodcast.com/plus. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. That helps us out tremendously. Leave us a comment. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? We want to know. We want to thank our founding partners, 10 Strike Racing. Great to see some of that team this weekend. They had some winners. Also, our charity partner got to see Kim Weir from Therapeutic Horses of Saratoga on Saturday as well. Always great to see her. Always great to hear about the work they do, helping humans and horses over at Therapeutic Horses of Saratoga. To learn more about them, go to inthemoneypodcast.com/horses. Most of all, though, I want to thank all of you, the listeners, for making these shows so much fun to do. The show's been a production of In the Money Media. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos.